Okay, hey everyone, this is Oren Conheim. I am giving a talk on the 80s on film. I'm here because I think Philip's very innovative in his format and I had a great time. I'm also a promotion whore. I have a Patreon, I have a film talk on the 80s, and I want to promote my courses on how to get published. I'm a journalist with a beat on film. So let's talk about what happened in the 80s. This was the era of the blockbuster and this was in full effect. This doesn't mean that people were not trying to make money with films before Jaws and Star Wars in the 1970s, but they realized that they could front load the film, they can put massive advertising and blitz it, and get people in the theater the opening weekend. So basically, on the hype alone, you don't have to make great movies as much as you just have to spend a lot and make it big, and you can get a lot of event films, and that kind of affected movies from then on. It also made it so that you also want to appeal to the most people possible at the opening weekend, which is how you started getting a lot of teen movies. Over half of Entertainment Weekly's top 50 high school teen movies of all time were in this decade. I'm not saying this is an endorsement. I think John Hughes was pretty horrible from what I've seen. You can feel free to fight me on it. I know that well, The Breakfast Club, it ends where the nerd writes the essay at the end. So what changed? Um, Pretty in Pink, there was a tagline about how this person had an adorable grandma who was sexually harassing her. Or maybe that was 16 Candles. Also, do we really need more John Cusack? And does anyone really remember anything about the movie other than the guy holding the boombox? You also had lots of testosterone, other than say 9 to 5, Sigourney Weaver and Aliens, or maybe Working Girl with Melanie Griffith. This was not a strong decade for women. Sorry, ladies. You also had like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Claude Van Damme, and Steven Seagal doing their thing here. And neither of those guys, the latter guys, were actually really good at acting or smart or anything but jerks on sets, unfortunately. Um, Part two, the 80s was also a generation where there was like very big stereotypes. The jerk, the not jerk, jock, nerd division, and then the Wall Street guys, I think, in particular, the Gordon Gekko character, Michael Douglas, kind of a stereotype of the jock, the successful guy. There was a lot of masculinity in this decade. 1979 was the start of four franchise: Alien, Star Trek, Muppets, and Mad Max. So it was a bright idea. It's way easier to do a sequel than something new. But the tradition continues, and Rambo, Rocky, Ghostbusters, Look Who's Talking, Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, all kinds of stuff was going on in the 80s. And the best sequel, of course, in the 80s was Empire Strikes Back. And the fact that many people found it to be something new that Star Wars didn't do gave the idea that the sequel could be better. Also, the directors lost a lot of control because a lot of films were really lost a lot of money. People might like Terry Gilliam, but he actually did lose a lot of money. There was a film called Inchon, which was funded by, I believe it was a Scientologist named Sung Myung Moon, who owns the Washington Post. Ishtar was a film that lost a lot of money. Heaven's Gate lost so much money it bankrupted the studio, known as United Artists. Also Columbia Pictures, you'll see it with the woman in the thing, sold to Sony, and that meant a lot more accountants and bankers would run the studios as opposed to creative types, arty types. And I am also, let's talk about the thing that comes after that slide, which is some notable films. If you want to sound smart at a cocktail party or something and be like, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to films, someone's like, what's your 80s film? Favorite 80s film? Might want to choose something like this. This is a list of films that aren't too artsy and obscure, but generally are kind of like films that like the critics and like the people that matter kind of thought were good films. Um, Films that I know nothing about, so don't ask me about them. This is a pet peeve of people who are film writers, is expecting me to have seen everything. I have no idea what these films are about. I don't care. I will probably never watch these films just because I'm so pissed off at people asking me what these films are about. Also, fun fact, the film at the bottom of the list, Best Friends Till Tuesday, was just a film I made up. So you didn't see that film either. Haha. All right, let's talk about just a few of the films that I thought were some pretty unique films that I recommend, or maybe don't, but I just thought it'd be fun to just talk about really quickly. Anyway, which Way You Can is a film in which Clint Eastwood randomly boxes people. Um, he's a trucker who just gets into fistfights with people in ways that resemble different levels of Street Fighter. Like he fights some people in a meat locker. There's also a monkey. He falls in love with a country singer who ghosts him, but he gets the monkey. Um, and then there is a GIF. See, I know how to use GIFs, and that's what it's like to be punched by Clint Eastwood. The leading lady is Sandra Locke, who I thought was a very beautiful woman, valedictorian of her high school class in Tennessee, so also a very talented woman. She was literally the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in film or anywhere else, and she was decomposing for 2 weeks last year in the heat of Los Angeles because the police took 2 weeks to discover that she was dead. So it's funny to think just like the most beautiful woman in the world is not immune from rot eating bacteria. A View to a Kill, I think, is not the worst James Bond movie, but I think it is the most zany. The worst James Bond movie film is the ones that are like the most boring, like Looking at You for Your Eyes Only. It stars Christopher Walken as a James Bond villain, which is pretty much all you need to know for like how silly a James Bond villain can get. I don't think Walken, controversial statement, I don't think Christopher Walken, Jeff Goldblum, or John Malkovich are aware of how funny they are just by speaking, which I think by definition makes them bad actors. If you're not in on the joke of like your speech ticks, um, at this movie, Roger Moore was older than Tanya Roberts' mother, prompting him to quit. The plot of flooding Silicon Valley, which isn't even where the microchips are, wasn't as zany as the original plot, which was to destroy Halley's Comet. Um, Also, it stars Grace Jones, who is a extremely intimidating Bond girl. And she picks up her boyfriend of the time, Dolph Lundgren, who has like a bit role. And there's also Kimberly, who is the Arctic submarine driver who gets it on with James Bond because, of course, that's what James Bond girls do. But then the question is, who's driving the submarine? There's also a girl named Jenny Flex, played by Allison, Indiana Jones's Allison Doody, who James Bond doesn't even bother trying to sleep with, even though he gives this lewd innuendo line of "I am known to keep my tip up." That's like, I'm not saying you should bed every woman if you're a secret agent, but like, why are you going halfway with this plot? Romancing the Stone is something that's influenced every action movie in the last 3 years. So like, if you want to know what's the source material for like Ghosted, Argyle, Lost City, Free Guy, which is kind of a gender reverse version of this, King Solomon's Mines, basically a romance novel. Just lives out her own adventure. Like she gets into like the real world off the page or something, and it's like, same thing. All right. Also, I don't recommend the sequel. Cannonball Run. I cannot say enough good things about this movie. It is the most zany, crazy movie. I absolutely love it. It is based on an actual series of cross-country races where people drove 150 miles per hour. It was the 70s. The police were unable to do much if you left their jurisdiction, so people could get away with driving really, really fast back then. And it stars literally everyone. If you don't know who these people are, then I do feel sorry for you. But like, there's a lot of awesome people, and there's another monkey in the movie. And yeah, Roger Moore plays a guy, James Bond from earlier. It's fun to see him getting punched because he never actually gets punched. He's about to get punched. I guess this gift didn't do it. But he plays a guy who was like paying his mother to who's asking his mother to give him plastic surgery to make him look like Roger Moore. He's not the actual Roger Moore. Cocoon is a kind of a funny film. It's like E.T. or Abyss, where like they're aliens, but no one really is that stoked that they're seeing aliens. And the aliens, basically, their main role is to cure the erectile dysfunction of these three guys in the movie. One of them is Wilford Brimley, who is doing a lot of who you probably know from a lot of commercials. He did Quaker Oats, he did diabetes medicine, and at this point, he's like at the end of his life. It's like, I don't want to buy whatever you're selling. Then there's Don Amici, who won an Oscar, but he only had like 6 lines in the movie. It's mostly because in the 1930s he was like this very awesome, dashing actor, but like the Don Amici in the 1980s, like I don't know if he's worth it. Short Circuit is the inspiration for Wake, Rattle, and Roll. If you know that show from the 80s, we would probably be best friends. Cocktail is Tom Cruise at his most Tom Cruisiest. It features Kokomo from the Beers Boys. No offense to the bartender here, but it will make you hate bartenders. It might basically make you hate Tom Cruise, but at a certain point, I've got to love the guy. I don't care if he jumps on a couch. We all jump on couches. So to conclude, you should support me as a film writer and journalist, and come to my film talk and support Philip.